In today's video, I am going to discuss cognitive and behavioral aspect of self. Before that one, I had discussed about personal self, social self, and the definition and the concept of self. In this topic, I will precisely cover the concept and idea of the self concept, the meaning of it, and which are the important factors which may subscribe or which may be uh, attributes to decide regarding our self concept. And few of them are self efficacy, self esteem, and self regulation. Here I will only discuss self esteem along with the self concept. Self efficacy and self regulation will be discussed in the next video. So, behavioral and the cognitive aspects of the self means how do we think and analyze about our own self? What are the methods, processes which are basically used by us to identify ourselves with our social identity, physical identity, cultural identity, any kind of the identity with you relate with. You just try to understand. And when you feel that these identities are going to be permanent or stable for a long period of time, you feel quite secure about yourself. You feel extremely confident about yourself. And this kind of the confidence exhibits in the self concept. And these things are processed by ourselves. We keep evaluating ourselves, we keep measuring ourselves as a subject or as an object. Uh, we keep thinking about ourselves consistently uh, with respect to all kinds of approaches we follow in our life. And then we keep forming the self concept, we keep changing it also, but the change is not very much drastic. Change takes place uh, due to the variety of reasons, but it is gradual in nature. It's a evolutionary in nature. It will not be a drastic change because you keep analyzing yourself consistently throughout the life from the time you get a cognition to measure that. So that any change which happens or which comes in our life at the level of self, that is evolutionary in nature. It is uh, uh, so first I'll now discuss the how do you define the self concept. How do you understand how can you understand the idea of the self concept? Self concept is all about the perceiving or holding the idea about our own competencies in a specific field or in any other area or attributes of the personality. So it's a very comprehensive, it is very comprehensive detailing of your personality in which you measure which part of the personality, which side of the personality, which are the important attributes, the good qualities you have. All these things are measured in uh, measured under this concept. So the totality of the perception about your own competencies and attributes about yourself can describe the self concept. Self concept can be positive or negative both because it should be positive. The tendency of human being to form a positive self concept always by distorting the reality. But at times it can be negative also. So if a person who is very rational in his approach or while evaluating his self-concept, he may form positive and negative self-concept. For few of the approaches and the qualities, he may have a very positive self-concept. Somebody can be good at singing, somebody can be good at many other activities, somebody can be a good orator, and they can form a good opinion. Okay, I have a positive. They have positive self-concept about those attributes, those qualities of his life. On the basis of that, a person decides the future course of action. What does he want to become? What can he do in his life? What are his emotive skills? How can he make his life more successful? So these positive concepts, self-concept, play play important roles while deciding your future course of the action, while evaluating your life at any point of the time. And that's why it plays a very important role. Negative self-concept is also very, very important because it allows us to discriminate, create a discrimination rightfully so that when we should not get into the wrong area and wrong thing. If the positive self-concept outweighs the negative self-concept, then we can say it will be good balance because then your plan will be quite positive. But if the negative self concept is quite higher, then there will be difficulty while deciding how to formulate the idea, how to formulate the career plan, how to formulate the future goals of the life, because your self concept is quite negative about many things. So the confusion will be much larger. But if it is in balance, I think the negative self concept about few things will positively complement the positive concept. So in a way, the negative self concept should not be always presumed as a negative as per se. Mm, It can be equally positive because it enhances the our ability to use the our self concept on the basis of the positive element, and at the same time we can discriminate those areas where our self concept is negative. But if the negative self concept outweighs this positive self concept, then the person can be out of the confidence, out of the right thinking, right understanding, um, poor self confidence. All these things will create another kind of imbalances there. So here the negative self concept, if it outweighs the positive self concept, then the positive self concept will not be able to endorse the amount of confidence in the person where the person can take up the life forward, can take up the life positively. So this is the very basic understanding. So every person, and in my opinion, none of the person has the poor ability. Let me demonstrate you with an example here. We always have a debate. Somebody is a good at study, and somebody have never gone to school. And basically the result of the school always produces the measurement of his intellectual skill, and he can have a very good self concept because he got the mark sheet, he had been everything there. Other person who had not got anything from the institutional framework, he may have the poor self concept because he has not gone to school. But in spite of that thing, the learning of that person did not get stopped. So don't forget that. The aspect in person who is born in this world, who is slightly vigilant, moving here and there, uh, still he's learning. He's learning, his mind is still getting something. He can be good at something. But sometimes he does not fit into the institutional requirement and criteria. It doesn't mean that he should hold a negative self concept in that particular context. Person should have the approach to rationally analyze his positives and negatives, and then he can form the self concept. So this kind of biases if a person who is highly qualified academically, who forms against the people who had never gone to school or who had never been privileged to get those advantages, they will be mistaken. They will be highly mistaken. And therefore, you can see a lot of people in this world, without joining the institution, had been able to leave their imprint and mark, which had been extraordinarily good. But these examples are lesser because every achievement had to magnify in the institutional structure. So we should not forget. Therefore, somebody who got quite successful, for example, Bill Gates, who had not been very academically sharp, but institutional format of the education had been quite poor. In spite of that one, he had made his mark. But you have to realize that he had whatever the mark he had made there in his life, it got reflected institutionally because now the Microsoft is serving everything in the institutional format, doing everything which can be achieved and acquired academically. So those people who had been noticed had had achieved something in the life through the non-institutional measures and got successful, but somehow when those successes get fit into the institutional structure, it gets identified. But as a psychologist, as a person who is a keen learner of psychology, who should identify either person did not get noticed or person got noticed, person has the very biggest stature, you should not measure a person on these grounds of biasness and discrimination. You should have always an open mind, open platform to evaluate the person's self identity, person's identity, and the ability and his attributes on the rational grounds, where you have to consider all these factors and the points there. So now, when I just move ahead from the idea of the self concept, self concept largely plays on the uh, largely plays on the three factors. That is, one is the self esteem. Self esteem is the value judgment about yourself and ourselves. The self efficacy is about your own belief that you may control your life outcomes, that is not dependent upon the uh, fatalist approach. You believe that you may control your life outcomes, you may decide that one, you may determine that, you may put hard work towards that, and you can achieve that. And self regulation is about the self control, where you can organize, monitor your own behavior, and that ability is that one, it also gives you the very positive self concept. So on these three important psychological attributes, somebody can measure it, but there are many more attributes here which we can add and we can study. But here, as per the content of the syllabus, we should not go far beyond that. So right now, I'll confine my discussion around self-esteem. So self-esteem is always the judgment about our own values or the ability, or you can say the worth. So how do you evaluate your own worth? And if you recognize, okay, I am very worthful in that particular area, in particular field or specific field, you will have a high self-esteem. You may do it very well in that area. You will be always confident of performing. And you can realize that, okay, that there is high self-esteem in that area. Somebody is a good batsman. He can have always high self-esteem for batting. He can't have the high self-esteem for bowling. And somebody is a good bowler and is an average batsman. He can always feel low self-esteem about his batting. Sometimes, fortunately, tailenders who are good bowlers end up turning the matches, and this kind of the wins, which come through the good batting of the bowlers, it brings a lot of confidence among the those bowlers who had never batted very well, never considered as a good batsman. and then they develop the high self-esteem for the batting also. You can take an example in Indian cricket team. One is the Ashwin, who had been a spinner, came as a bowler. He had never been a good batsman, but few innings he had played technically very well, and he succeeded. And he had some degree of confidence among the high self-esteem among the bowlers to bat well also. You can take an example of Anil Kumble, who had played in the past and who had also had been extremely a good bowler. But in few matches he batted, and sometimes people had also believed if the few runs are required and Anil Kumble is batting, people used to recognize, okay, he may be able to achieve the target. So this is the way, and batsman also exhumes the trust of the people because he recognizes that he had achieved that thing in the past. So that's the way self-esteem is constructed. Self-esteem, for one thing, sometimes tries to construct the self-esteem in another area. Somehow, because you are able to exhibit some ability of translate your ability of one area and use your techniques and other things to exhibit the good quality in another area. So this is the very basic idea of the self-esteem. As per the many psychologists, when we study the psychology of children, from when children start forming, the, the self-concept regarding his self-efficacy, at what age a child starts formulating the idea, okay, the child is good in these areas or that area. Various studies in psychology suggest that around the age of 6 and 7, uh, before that one, the child learns the language. The child develops the self-esteem regarding his own worth and the self-concept about self-esteem at least in 4 areas. And these 4 areas are very much very well known for all of us because we carry it forward throughout life. The first one is the academic competence. Second one is social competence. Third is the physical athletic competence and physical appearance. And I'll take up one by one. Uh, Child of the 7 years of the age, uh, they start competing at academically because they start academic competence means they can write well, they can draw very well because at the very beginning of the age, they learn few things. They are just climbing the ladder of learning. And whatever the possibility of academic exuberance, the child who is competent there, who has a self-belief, they start showing that confidence at that age. Social competence also becomes the part of it. The child started recognizing the relationship, started relating with the person with whom he likes. He may try to spend time with those persons. Also exhibits a lot of courtesies in his behavioral exchanges. So the child starts exhibiting those things in a social competence front. His child gets quite obedient. He follows the obedient command of the elders with whom the child can relate. Then the physical athletic competence. That is the area where the child compete with other child, or the children compete among the other fellow friends. Uh, what do they do? Because whatever the games which are available in their capacity, if they can run, they can, if children in the villages, they can play marbles, they can play different games, they can test their ability to climb tree, to carry something from one place to the other, to learn something of different kinds. Whereas in the urban setting, children are very much competing at the level of the different level of the athletic competence there, which are taught. A child is learning tennis from the very beginning, that they start competing with their friends. So there are the different sets, but in general, either children from the rural India who are least exposed to the urban advances, or the children of urban India who are the least exposed to the rural lives. Both of them, they exhibit in their respective area that degree, the competition, the physical athletic level. The next is the physical appearance. I think that is the companion of our throughout the life. I think at the 7 years of the age, you start noticing, are you looking smart? Are you looking good? You just see yourself in the mirror. And that is companion throughout your life because throughout the life you want to look good, young, and you are very conscious about the facts. Some child who finds himself is very handsome, he recognizes that because a lot of people say him or say her, "Ki you are pretty or you are handsome," and the child forms a very good self-concept or self-esteem about because he's very handsome, he's very smart, he looks very nice, and regarding and that self-esteem he carries forward in the life. Some people who were very much poor self-esteem about his look, but gradually when he grows up and he knows how to keep himself and he starts also identifying, he's also smart. That changes his self-concept in the later stage of the life. You may also recognize in terms of physical appearances, many children appear very, very handsome and pretty in the childhood, and then later on they appear very dull and on some children who will appear who have the average look, but in the later stage of the life, who equally form a very good outlook by just maintaining himself, by carrying himself very well there. So, if these capacities, this competence, you can say, mm, if these dispositions and these evaluations persist for a longer period of the time, uh, then it forms a general psychological image of our, okay, who we are. So it's a general psychological image we form, and on the basis of that, we operate, and our behavior also gets very consistent around these lines. So it's just imagine the children who have the high academic self-esteem. They keep maintaining it. They keep making effort for that. For an example, let's just take an example of a child who had been very good at study in the very beginning stage of the life. When he goes to the another class, syllabus gets slightly vast. He's not coping up with that, but he makes effort because he has to hold this reputation or to hold his high self-esteem because he had been academically very good. In larger number of the cases, children succeed and always are able to maintain his high self-esteem with his high performance. In few cases, few children try to catch up the gap or to try to catch up his position, academic position, but he fails successively and it starts forming the negative self-concept that is highly suffocating because the child had got so much support, so much praise for his academic excellence and he is gradually declining. That is a where they form a negative self-concept. Some children have the very high self-esteem for other areas and they keep performing in that other area. It applies in all other areas like this one. You can see the sports also. In some, you can see some final matches where the player who had a lot of experience, like Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Djokovic, when they play matches in final, and against whom when the new players come and play the final against whom, it's more likelihood that the experienced player win the match because he had faced those conditions so many times, and he had a high self-esteem of managing his psychic space in a crucial matches, and as a result, they win the match because they're having a high self-esteem. And that's why you can see the variety of sports when the right time requires to perform, then high self-esteem people having the high self-esteem, they don't underperform due to the pressure. They perform very nicely when they get the pressure. The good example is Mahendra Singh Dhoni, who won the World Cup final when the India had to score some good runs to win the match against Sri Lanka, and he came to bat. At that moment, you can see he would have succumbed to the pressure to score, but he took the risk. He had hit some shots out of the ground. He hit the two, three sixes, big sixes, and it exhibits that the person who came to bat there didn't allow the pressure to just get into him or get over him. Rather than he just tried to exhibit because due to high self-esteem because he had done those things in the past as well. So therefore, these things, this kind of problems when you face your high self-esteem gets nurtured further. It gets enhanced. But in some cases, suppose there are many parents who genuinely try to control a child or always want to help them because they are not able to stop themselves. And in both those areas, the children don't require any help. Still, you go to help them. What happens in this case? In those cases, when even the child doesn't require any help, you go to help them, you basically play with his self-esteem. He will never form a high self-esteem where he can form the self-independence to operate well. So in those cases where the parents are intervening, in those areas where children don't require any help, but because parents, out of their own obsessive concerns, get into the children's life and try to break his high self-esteem into a very poor self-esteem, and those children are always out of confidence. So we can understand through these examples, high self-esteem is a very good aspect. It keeps enhancing the way we conceive the idea, the way we formulate our life plan, we make successes in those particular area, and if we keep making proving ourselves in those areas, and our success rate is quite high, I think the high self-esteem will be the recurring deposit in your life and keep adding to your self-confidence and good balance also, because it will not be because you will go out of confidence, or you will be very excessive confidence will mar your performance, because that comes through the experience. That's why anything is based on that is going to actually formulate your personality uh, in a very generic, sound way, and you may have a very good self-concept about it. So with this note, I am binding this lecture. Other two concepts of self-regulation and self-efficacy I'll cover in the next class.